Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Very excited that game on CBS, America's Most Watched Network, the network of stars, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff will be Purdue playing host to Notre Dame. And look, last time we saw Purdue, Hudson Card went out there with that Cover 3 podcast bump. Nearly a perfect day in their opener against Indiana State. Then the Boilermakers have actually had a week off this past weekend, all getting ready for this big opportunity against Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish, of course, enter coming off of that loss to Northern Illinois, where, as the week has progressed, we are starting to wonder about the overall health of Riley Leonard. Reports indicating and a review of game footage showing a couple hits that he took that might have led to a reported injury for Riley Leonard. But what's your feel in terms of how Riley's health might impact the way that Notre Dame plays in this game?
Chip, I think it's really the entire handicap of the game, to be frank. We talked about prior to the Texas A&M game just how much we love the fit of Riley Leonard with this offense because of his legs. This offensive line is extremely green. Remember, they lost their top two tackles to the NFL draft in the top 40 picks. Their heir apparent is already gone for the season. So the offensive line is rather suspect by Irish standards, right? And ultimately here, Leonard's escapability is some of the best in the country, but the injury is to his non-throwing shoulder reportedly. And that's a big deal to me because I don't really care about his throwing. It's not that good, but the running is really good. If he cannot run effectively, which we saw last week against Northern Illinois, where Notre Dame suffered what is probably the largest upset of the season as a 28.5-point favorite, then it does call into question whether he should be starting this game. And we'll see if he does start, and we'll see just how effective he can be and how long that leash is before they decide to go to backup Steve Angeli.
Yeah, I mean, this is an injury that everyone's going to be watching for to see exactly how Marcus Freeman handles this. Does he play or not? What'll be interesting is the conversation that, is going on with Riley Leonard and the medical staff. Like, what do you do for this injury? Is it something where it's a pain tolerance deal and you could say, hey, give me a shot so I can go out there and play? Or is it something where, no, you can't do that because you could get hurt much worse? Like there's an injury, where there's a chance where you could miss extended time because you hurt it worse. So that's the conversation that's having right now. I do think, and we were talking during the break about this, that Steve Angeli, he did have a pretty strong performance against Oregon State in the bowl game. And maybe it does force them to run more of an offense that's a little bit more traditional, but does maybe rely a little bit more on the bright sides we've seen at wide receiver. Greathouse has looked better. Bo Collins has looked better. Like all of a sudden, the receivers, which have been a point of concern for Notre Dame, also all of a sudden look a lot better. So maybe it's an opportunity for them to want to not rely so much on Riley Leonard and his legs and allow somebody to actually throw the football. Because this, it's funny because we did talk about another team. There are only 5 teams in all of college football that do not have a touchdown pass yet. Northwestern, we talked about at the beginning of the show, they're one. Notre Dame is one of the others, and it's the first time since 2007 that Notre Dame has not had a passing touchdown in the first 2 games of the season. So at some point, they need to be more balanced. Even if Riley Leonard is playing, it's the book is out. I know Bud likes talking about this, like just stop him running. Good luck, make him throw the football. So that's something to just keep an eye on. The story kind of this game is his health. How does he play if he does? Is he going to be able to throw? And then what if he can't play? Does Angeli actually give him a better passing game option?
It's funny you mentioned that 2007 season because that was the last time Purdue actually beat Notre Dame. Now, they don't play as often as they used to, but Notre Dame has an 8-game winning streak in this rivalry. And I do think that obviously the Riley Leonard situation plays a huge role. But I think if you're Notre Dame and you're coming off a home loss to Northern Illinois, you can't just keep going with the status quo unquestionably. You have to kind of wonder what you're doing and if maybe a change is better for you long term. So if Riley Leonard's banged up and you're not sure about him, maybe you do go with Angeli because, Danny, you mentioned one of the things that has stood out in these first 2 games of the season, even with the loss last week, is at the receiver position, Notre Dame looks more explosive. They look better than they had in recent years. And Riley Leonard is not exactly the best player to take advantage of that. But this is a matchup in which Notre Dame could possibly look to exploit because, listen, Purdue crushed Indiana State, and they should feel great about it. They've got the extra week to prepare for this game. but this is still not a Purdue team that I think any of us look at as a really strong, excellent team. And defensively, Ryan Walters loves to play man coverage. He loves to pressure the quarterbacks and leave his defensive backs on an island. So if you have the kind of talent that Notre Dame says it has and has shown flashes of at wide receiver, why not put a quarterback in there who can take advantage of those guys getting open against the secondary and maybe hit some big plays? So if I have any question about Riley Leonard's health and his ability to play in this game, I'm looking at it as an opportunity to see what I have behind him, to see if I could get this team to be a better football team, because I know you spent a lot of money getting Riley Leonard to come from Duke to Notre Dame, and I know there was a lot of hype around it, but you just lost at home to Northern Illinois, so maybe it wasn't the right decision.
Yeah, Tom, there are very few teams that I care about more and know less about here heading into week 3 than the Purdue Boilermakers, who just have an absolute pasting of Indiana State as the only data point that we have to be able to pin on them. Total mystery team to me right now. But if we are to try to, pin this and you're to make a prediction, Tom, how do you think this one ends up playing out?
I do think that Notre Dame should win this game, because we can look at it the one way and say, hey, a road game against a Power 4 team, Notre Dame's fine. It's at home against the G5 where they truly struggle. But I think that it's a lot closer than I would have anticipated a few weeks ago or even 8 days ago, because of the Riley Leonard injury and because of just Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. And I think if you look at Purdue, obviously we don't look at a big win over Indiana State and say, oh, this team's great, they're back, they're going to be phenomenal. But they are feeling great about themselves, and they've had the extra week to prepare for this game. So they're coming into a home game extremely confident, looking at a Notre Dame team that just lost to Northern Illinois and saying they're vulnerable. There's blood in the water. They're smelling it. They're going to go get it. So I do think this is going to be a much closer game than I would have anticipated a couple days ago. I still think the Irish rally and get this one, because I do think defensively they will present a lot of challenges for this Purdue offense and keep them from putting too many points on the board. So I'm taking Notre Dame, but I'm not super confident in it.
I think Tom nailed this one, honestly. If you look at this, if you're a Notre Dame defender, you're looking around when you're watching film, you're saying, man, Riley's dinged up. We need to play really well. And honestly, Purdue has some real weapons. Hudson Card is playing well. Jamal Adreen, the receiver, is playing really well. Max Clair, who was hurt last year, the tight end, is playing really well. But do you know who was not playing real well against Indiana State, and Notre Dame is going to notice? 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen for Purdue were graded at a 60.0 or below by PFF. If you are Notre Dame's defensive line, you smell blood in the water, right? Like, hey, we need to go out and dominate these guys, pressure Hudson Card all day, and we can do it. So I do think Notre Dame's defense will carry the day here. But like Tom said, it's hard to see this team winning by margin unless Purdue just gives it to them.
Yeah, and as bad as the Northern Illinois loss was, the defense, you hold them to 16 points, you should still win against Northern Illinois. That should be good enough to win. I know they were the physicality of it, the fact that they did get pushed around a little bit. Northern Illinois was able to get some tough yardage throughout those situations is concerning. But I do think this is where Notre Dame's defense picks up the slack. Not one, but 2 of my former teammates with the New York Giants' sons anchor that defensive line. R.J. Oben and Howard Cross III, a tight end for me. Both their sons, forces on that defensive line. I think they'll step up. I think this is one where it's a pride game. You bounce back. I think they'll be fine. And I'm not completely sold. 24-25 sounds awesome, and it was for Hudson Card. That's hard to do in practice against air, but it practically was against air. This will be a totally different situation.
Disrespecting the spoiler makers. Okay, I'll see y'all on Thursday. I'm just saying. Okay, coming up on the other side, we've got a couple of old rivalries that have been going on forever. And we thought conference realignment might mean we wouldn't get them, but we get them this week. New Big Ten members, Oregon, Washington, seeing some old familiar foes. We'll take a quick look at those rivalry games and more next.